It's spelled Cerphe. It's pronounced Cerphe, and yes, it is his real name. Cerphe has been on rock radio in Washington since the early 70s, named Greenest DJ in America and appointed to the Global Advisory Committee by Earth Day Network. Cerphe hosts the Progressive Show on Music Planet Radio and the Vinyl Vault on Cerphe.com. Cerphe began his broadcast career at WHFS while an art major at American University. After a long run at HFS, Cerphe moved on to legendary DC rock stations WAVA, DC 101, WJFK, and Classic Rock 94.7 before landing at Music Planet Radio, where he shares his passion for great rock and roll. During a broadcast career that spans more than 5 decades, Cerphe has shared conversations with rock and roll's elite, members of the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Bruce Springsteen, and so many more. But right now, Cerphe is here with us on this Van Meter podcast. Welcome, Cerphe.
Ernie, thank you for having me. This is exciting to be part of this. Thanks so much.
I assume from high atop some virtual outer space cosmic satellite somewhere.
Yes, I'm high atop Loudoun County today, Ernie. I'm in my home studio here in Leesburg.
You began your professional career, if I'm correct, in the early 70s, which was an iconic time for music. And WHFS, in my opinion, was a catalyst for the meteoric rise of the popularity of FM radio. Now, in the early 70s, most cars didn't have FM. Are you at all surprised by the lasting influence of that radio station?
You know, I'm not. We were a social art form before social media, and we never really lost our station identity or distorted our brand, if you will. We were eclectic, and listeners knew that, and they loved what we did on WHFS. We made a loud noise that still resonates, just like you say. I mean, there were so many great stories and so much magic that surrounds WHFS. I'm very protective of it, actually. Sometimes it seems like it's almost one of my children. We loved what we did. It was fun. I mean, it wasn't easy back then to be different, and HFS was very, very different. We left a very heavy footprint, and I'm proud of that. You know, we did some world-class promotions and things that other stations weren't doing. We were certainly taking a lot of liberty and a lot of chances with the music that we played. And by the time that most of us had a show on HFS, underground progressive radio began to have some street cred. So yeah, HFS was on the cutting edge. There were just a handful of stations in the early 70s that started to do that, and we're one of them.
And you and HFS accomplished so much on a station that had a really tough signal to pick up in Northern Virginia.
We had a terrible signal, and I mean, people used to string wires out their window and outside of their homes to get us. And if the wind would blow in the north direction or something, we'd lose a lot of listeners in Northern Virginia. So you really had to be motivated to listen to us on HFS. But yeah, we had a lousy signal. But you know what? People found a way, and by the time we figured out that we were doing something right, I mean, we were starting to get very, very popular. And having a radio show on HFS, for me, really introduced me to the world of music. I was always the guy in college and high school parties that was at the turntable playing the music and changing the songs. And suddenly, I had a much larger soapbox when I got a show on HFS. And, getting introduced to bands that we loved up close and personal. The concert and club scene here in DC was amazing. I mean, there was powerful music, beautiful girls, fistfights in bathrooms, early managers, high maintenance musicians. I know this sounds like a Ramones song, but it's true. This is what rock and roll radio is and was. And we at HFS had very easy access to the great majority of artists because we were about the only game in town having very eclectic tastes. And we were the weird kids who understood the music culture, and we weren't afraid to make some of the gut decisions based on our passion for the music scene. One of the guys that I worked with, Damien, was very much into the blues, and he sort of introduced me to the world of blues that I didn't know much about. And I got to hang out with some of the great blues artists, Muddy Waters, and just some of the greats. I mean, some of the really amazing cats that were doing what they did. And all of us on HFS, we were like some of the characters in the films High Fidelity and Almost Famous. We felt that commercial corporate rock radio wasn't what we were all about. And we wanted to do it differently. And trends in radio and music come and go. And, it's hard not to feel kind of a bit jaded with the music and radio industries. They're pretty much artistically and financially bankrupt. But there's probably going to be a resurgence at some point. There's a lot of great music out there, and radio isn't really playing a lot of it. But that's what we do now on musicplanetradio.com, based out of my home studio here in Leesburg. We're making music more exciting again for the adult audience, the way we felt about it 25 or 30 years ago.
Today, there are a lot more choices than just AM and FM, with streaming services and satellite radio and on and on. Somehow, you've had success in Loudoun County and beyond with your music-oriented show on your own podcast. The residents of Loudoun County obviously like your show, as you seem to win the popularity polls every year. What are the new challenges and opportunities you face in this new environment? You must be used to change by now.
Well, you have to be used to change. I mean, you and I are both expatriates of DC 101, and wasn't that a fun time, by the way?
The best.
It was amazing. And we were down on Connecticut Avenue at Connecticut and M, where our studios were. We were right in the middle of it. But that was then, and this is now. And with Music Planet Radio, the idea is to be different and not do things that FM is doing right now. What's happening on FM music stations is that ratings have been trending down for the last 10, 15 years. News talk stations are doing okay, but music not so much. And I think for us, and I've been doing this now 10 years. I left FM a couple of years ago, but the company that I was working for, I had grandfathered this thing in, Music Planet Radio, started it up, and they let me continue to do that and my FM radio show. But now I'm doing this 100% of the time. And what we do is that we play a lot of classic rock, but not the same 125 songs that classic rock stations play all the time. We go a little deeper, and we also play a lot of the artists who reside in and around Loudoun County. There's a very strong music scene here in Loudoun County, and we at Music Planet Radio, we support it. So, if you like to be part of a great radio station like HFS, and for us at DC 101. And you kind of hope you can be proud of it 30 years down the road, because rock radio, when it's great, it's amazing. I mean, it changes your life. It changed our lives. And, here we are. It's magic stuff. There's great joy and pleasure in celebrating the mojo of a station like HFS or like DC 101 that people love so much.
We have a limited time in this podcast to talk about all your experiences with just about every major rock and roll act in the world. Good thing you wrote a book. Tell us about that.
I did, yeah. Well, you know what? It's in its second printing, and it's a story of my life going back to my misspent youth, and just taking a look at what Washington radio was. And especially with WHFS. I mean, in the early days, what we played was subjective. It had nothing to do with sales or research or commercial pressures. We played what we wanted to play. And it is incredible when you think of the amount of freedom that we had back in the day. And that worked for us. I got to meet some amazing people. And one of them, because you're a Beatles fan, I'm a Beatles fan, I got to hang with George Harrison one afternoon at the Madison Hotel downtown D.C. in November of 1976, and ended up, there was an interview thing going on with the press, radio people, and print people with George. One of the first questions that some reporter asked was, "Hey, are the Beatles ever going to get back together?" And George just rolled his eyes. And a little later on in the interview, I just took the time to wait and watch, and they took a break. And George, we were standing around the catering table, and George walked over to me and said, "Can I get you a cup of tea?" And I'm about to weep. A Beatle is talking to me. It was a wild, wild moment. So we talked for a while, and it was absolutely magical. It was one of those moments of my Beatle moment, but a magical moment. So I have a photograph of me and George on the cover of my book. And what I've done with the book is not only looking at the radio in DC and sort of giving an overview of radio and clubs and music here, but also great stories about some of the people that I interviewed. Bruce Springsteen was a guest on my show very, very early on when he first played at a little club at DuPont Circle, the Child Herald, on 20th Street, and there were about 75 or 80 people down there. He was a new unknown act. And I met him and I asked him, I said, hey, I love your new album, Greetings from Asbury Park. It was his debut. And I said, I've got a radio show. You want to come on? And he said, sure. So Bruce and the band, a couple of weeks later, when they were back actually in Richmond, they were heading down towards Richmond. They stopped and they came. They got lost on the Beltway, and they were an hour and a half late for the interview. So it was one of those times that it was okay. He was a new unknown artist, and you can't get mad at him. But it was a funny story because he got lost. He didn't have a limo driver and security and all that kind of thing. He's driving himself in an old beat up van.
And all this was going on before Born to Run came out in 75. I mean, Bruce Springsteen was a household name around here.
Yeah, absolutely. What was his third album? And I mean, we were heavily into Bruce Springsteen at that point. Jerry Garcia was on my show 3 times. I was lucky enough to interview him once in the 70s, once in the 80s, and once in the 90s. Very articulate guy, talking about legendary guitar players like Django Reinhardt and Joe Pass. Little Feat, of course, were heavily played on WHFS, really to the point where people thought they were a local band. We loved them so much. So I've got a long chapter on Lowell George and Little Feat, who came to the studio many times, bringing Linda Ronstadt with them. I've got actually 2 long chapters on WHFS in my book. They're titled Side 1 and Side 2, and it's all kinds of stories about these people and Frank Zappa, who was a guest on my show many times, one of the only people I allowed to smoke cigarettes in the studio. I was not about to tell Frank Zappa, hey, you can't smoke. So I coughed and choked through the interview, but God bless him, he was nice enough to include me in his autobiography, and I included him in mine. But there's lots of good stories, and the book has gone into a second printing, and when the world changes to sanity again and we go out of where we are right now, we'll be doing book signings again in Metro Washington.
And for those of us who don't know how to find Cerphe on the air these days, give us some directions, please.
Sure. We are on musicplanetradio.com, and we're, of course, based out of Loudoun County. We live here and we work here. And the business community in Loudoun County is got such a strong base. I mean, we have been so fortunate to have great people that we've partnered with, like the Barnes at Hamilton Station Vineyards, and Fabioli Cellars, and Itopia Inc., and Deli South. The town of Leesburg is a client, Acoustic on the Green, Visit Loudoun, the Leesburg Flower and Garden Show, the Arc of Loudoun, their Shocktober event, Middleburg Humane Foundation, Purcellville Wine and Food Festival. All of these people we partner with because in Loudoun County, they have supported us at Music Planet Radio. And it just is simply a wonderful community, a strong economy, and great people that really have flourished the scene for music by having great musicians who live here, work in some of the great vineyards and breweries that are here too. So it's good. So listen to us on Music Planet Radio. I want more listeners.
And Cerphe, we're going to let you close the show with your classic. Rock on, baby.
You only rock once.